So good afternoon to those of you that have joined us from Europe, and good morning to those of you that have joined us overseas. We do have some people that are based in Asia that do watch this, so I should say good evening, and I hope it's not too late for you. So welcome to today. I'm in a different location. I'm in the Bloomsbury Hotel in their boardroom, so I'm very lucky. And then we have obviously Rick Hamill. So those of you that don't know Rick, Rick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So there's been a slight change. I have a different vibe, a different color, different name. My name is Rick Hamill, founder and CEO of what used to be called Helios. We actually went through a rebrand, and now we're globally, where we help companies scale worldwide but thrive globally. And we are a full global payroll HCM platform managing how companies actually manage their global teams and pay their global teams with flexible employment. So we are here meeting our clients where they are in their global journey.
And I have to say, sorry, Valeria, before we come to you, we have to address the great name of Globally. I mean, it's wonderful, isn't it, really? So congratulations and love the colour scheme and everything else. So wishing you all the best. I think it's exciting. So. And we got to see the advert as well, so I'll look at that afterwards, and then I'll share that in the comments. So, Valeria, this is your first session with us. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I mean, congratulations on the rebranding globally. It sounds like a very good name. Valerio Rossi here, co-founder and CEO at Wordfully. What we do at Wordfully is we help mid-market and enterprise customers to recruit in over 45 different countries. So what we do is we tackle global talent acquisition through a network of local recruiters in many different countries, specialized across many different verticals.
Fantastic. And I have to say, you are the winner of the best background, because that's
for sure.
Made me jealous.
Yeah. Most people think it's a fake background, but we actually our headquarters is based in Barcelona. So we're fortunate enough to have a beachfront office.
Yeah, I think if I had that, I wouldn't be working from home every day. I'd be working in your office. So it's beautiful. So today we're going to be talking about the role of payroll in global talent acquisition and retention. So I think before we start off, we've always got that figure in mind, haven't we? That if you pay people incorrectly twice, they look to move on. If there's issues, then people do start moving on. So it's actually a really important topic. So shall I just start off with asking the first question? Why are we talking about this, and why is payroll becoming such a critical factor in global talent acquisition and retention today? Why is it changing?
Yeah, so I'll jump in, but Valeria is going to be really an expert on this, by the way. But the way that I think about it from a payroll perspective, payroll is the tool that allows companies to be competitive, not only to attract talent, but also retain talent as well. Being competitive in a global marketplace. I always hate Melanie bringing up COVID, but that really was kind of the reset of how employers are looking at how they compensate employees. So working from home, remote employees, that factor of now I can work anywhere, but I still have certain basic needs and I have a certain expectation for what my role should pay, no matter where I live in the world. And so that's such a huge factor when it comes to employee retention, but also attracting extra employees as well. And looking at that and having the tool sets to make sure that you can make sure that you're competitive, making sure that you're benchmarking against your competitors to ensure that they're not poaching your people, and making sure you have the data points as you look at your annual reviews and your salary increases, or also your benefits, everything that you're actually paying out to employees. That is so important in regards to how you're actually retaining that talent. And I think about how you recruit talent. People are looking at that. People want to know why they should leave. I think there was a statistic in 2022 that said that 60% of employees cared more about benefits, pensions, than they actually cared about compensation, actual cash compensation. And I think that's important to understand that payroll is not just actual cash comp. It's actually the total package. And what a payroll team can do is provide that information to a business to ensure that they can attract and retain talent correctly.
Yeah. Valeria, what sort of thing are you seeing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I agree with Rick. What we see, it's essentially like a two-step thought process, right? Sometimes you need just a larger talent pool to pick from, right? So you're pushed by maybe price, maybe just specialization of talent, maybe just from pure numbers in terms of talent pool to recruit in multiple countries. So you don't want to recruit in a radius of 20 kilometers from your office, for instance, right? So you go in different countries. Or sometimes our customers are pushed to recruit globally by business reasons. So for instance, I need to go to market in Europe, right? I need to expand into the US. So I need to hire country managers and business development managers and SDRs and so on in so many different countries. Or maybe you have US companies that are typically pushed by price pressure to, for instance, build engineering team in South America, right? All of this, it makes a lot of sense from a talent acquisition and business standpoint, but you cannot really do that if you don't have a payroll system that can handle that, right? You can't go and do talent acquisition into the US if you can not offer, the right benefits, right? Or because people care more about the benefits sometimes than the. Or you can do that. You can build a tech team in Colombia, right? For instance, if you don't know what are the benefits and you're not able to provide those benefits and payroll compliantly, right? So at the end of the day, you have on one side the talent acquisition need to go global, but without the payroll side, essentially you just can't go to market in those countries. So two things that are essentially complementary.
So Mallory, I remember actually, this is years ago. I'm going to date myself when I was in HR, and I remember my CEO at that time reached out to me and said, "Hey, we just hired an employee in Japan. Make sure they get paid." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I remember calling my payroll provider and said, "Hey, I can't find the drop down for Japan." They go, "We don't do Japan. We're domestic." So having to figure that part out can be a challenge, right? And making sure that you're doing it compliantly. And our goal was, and look, you said it earlier, if I mess up a payroll twice, then I have an employee that's possibly looking to leave the organization because they lost trust in us. So that first payroll is critical, especially for the experience of that overall employee. And make sure from a business perspective, we're doing it compliantly, because if we don't do it compliantly, if we're not set up in that particular country with entities, or we're not using an employer of record, or we're not deciding to pay them as a contractor and this mutually agreed and fully compliant and vetted with our teams, then I have to figure out what's going to happen if that employee's payroll is not done correctly. And so having the right systems, one, to make sure that you can get in the country compliantly and quickly, but also making sure that you're doing it correctly for that employee experience. Because what's interesting is that people know, or they kind of expect if their gross pay is going to be, what they're supposed to be netting, especially if that's around what they already get paid today. And so they're always going to be ready for what their pay is. And when it hits that direct deposit, hits their account, and it's not correct, you've got one strike against you. So making sure it's set up correctly is so important for that employee retention.
And I think there's so much movement in the employee workforce. I was talking to somebody who set up a shared services in one country, and then a load of other companies were then sending it out because there's a talent pool, and then the talent pool got too expensive, and then they had to find another country to set up their workforce because they'd already, it had already been shared too much. And then we had a symposium this morning in London, and people were talking about within the payroll industry, with just being told, like similar to you, we have an employee in Japan. I had it where one of our members phoned up and just said, "I've been told we've got an employee in China. Can I use a UK Sage payroll software?" So even though that happened to you a few years back, it's still happening. And it's almost like payroll needs to be aware that workforce can be employed anywhere in the world, and be prepared at the click of a button that you're going to have to potentially look to pay somebody in a new territory that you have no knowledge, skill set, and that's more pressure, isn't it, on the company to then keep the staff, because you need to pay them correctly.
Well, I think that as you're looking at going after talent, right, with talent acquisition, if you're going to have a global mentality, you've got to think through what that actually means. Like making sure you set the right foundation in place to make sure that you can retain that, not only attract that talent, but retain that talent. So when I think about working with recruiters like Workfully, when we reach out to them and we say, hey, we want to hire someone in these particular countries, we have to have a conversation if that's going to be an employee, if that's going to be a contractor. We have to have that conversation so that they can be upfront in that conversation. And we also want to make sure it's compliant. You don't want to go somewhere where a employee may say, this feels a little shady, right? And so again, getting back to that trust that you're building with that overall candidate and from employee retention perspective. So making sure there's hand in hand. When they say payroll finds out after someone's hired, look, I'm a component of this. Payroll needs to be at the table at all times, but there should be a communication between talent acquisition, payroll, and HR so that they know what they can do and cannot do. And even not just hiring the actual talent, but understanding the costs and implications to the business. So if I'm going to hire someone, from an HR perspective, I don't want to know after the fact that we hired someone in Japan, for example. I need to be at the table talking about it because the business may have budgeted, and they're not just budgeting gross payroll. There's a cost associated with that. So what's the overall cost and package that we have to put together, and what does that look like when we put that in front of the candidate? Because if it's over budget, then we have to negotiate a different way. But if we're only negotiating that up front and not having HR and payroll at the table with talent acquisition, then it's going to breed a lot of inconsistencies, bad experiences, and a lot of mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, just to elaborate a little bit on that, I agree that you need a very close cooperation between talent acquisition and payroll and HR, all these stakeholders, especially when you are in a setting of multiple providers working together at the same time. One of the most common pitfalls we see in customers is that maybe they work with a recruiter or their internal recruiting team and so on, and an EOR partner, right, to hire somebody in a different country. And then the candidate ultimately refuse the offer because they just feel it's shady that they're not hired by the same entity as the company that made the recruitment process, right? This is because recruiters and the EOR provider haven't been upfront, right, with the candidate, and they couldn't handle that information gap that is essential to build trust with a candidate, especially if the candidate is in a market where your company have no presence, right? But also on the flip side, another of the common pitfall I see companies do is they work with a fragmented provider network, right? They have an HR system, and then they have a payroll system locally in their headquarters. Then they have an EOR provider, right, for different countries, and that just increase complexity, right? Complexity in communication, margin for mistakes, a lot of manual providers as well, especially EOR partners. So what we suggest to these customers is to really try and use as much as they can all-in-one solution, right? So it's an HRIS and payroll and payments and EOR, everything together. And we've been discussing with Rick multiple times about this, and I think it's the direction, right, that you guys are taking globally. And it's obviously one of the needs we see in the market is consolidation, right, of HR partners, providers, and so on. Also because if you don't have consolidation, you can't even have automation, right? You can't apply AI, you can't automate workflows if you use so many different providers. So that is one of the main trends as well we're seeing in customers and global hiring.
Yeah, I think that adding to that, I think being proactive in that conversation is really important. So to your point, we have quite a few customers who come to us and say, I'm not comfortable with an EOR solution, or I'm leaving an EOR, and I really want to make sure I'm establishing ourselves. And so we walk our customers through how to set up their entities. We make sure that they understand the timelines associated with that. We actually, there was an acquisition, as you know, Melanie, we acquired globally, we acquired a company a couple of weeks ago that does entity and compliance setup to make sure that companies actually can do this correctly. So using that example of Japan, We're in the middle of having a conversation with some talent in Japan or other countries for that matter, and you want to establish your entities to do global payroll. Now you have a solution within Globally where we can actually set up your entities and then actually transition you and get your payroll set up. But that's because talent acquisition and payroll and HR are having conversations so that there can be a proactive conversation about how they're going to set up. What's great about hiring globally, especially for US companies who are not maybe used to this, is that a lot of countries have notice periods. Unlike the US, we don't have standard notice periods. We have 2 weeks typically is customary, but it's not statutory within our contracts. And so those are things that you can leverage those timeframes to actually make sure that you can implement it and set up to make sure that you're doing things correctly. Same thing, leveraging systems that can help you with automation of your benefit enrollment, automation within onboarding. We call it localization, meaning we are global but local, making sure that that employee feels very at home in their overall onboarding process. I use the example for the US. If I don't ask you for your I-9, which is your right to work verification, you're going to think that something's wrong because you're used to asking that all the time. If I don't ask for your P11s and you're going to be like, wait, what's going on? Why are they asking these questions? We make sure that the employees have a very local experience when they're onboarding, so that they can make sure that it's smooth. Because again, getting back to talent acquisition and payroll, they're hand in hand. They have to make sure that if payroll is onboarding an employee, that HR needs to be aware of it, talent acquisition needs to be aware of it. So there's a better communication to ensure that employee experience is good upfront.
And it sounds like a really obvious statement, but you really do need to have in-country partners or global payroll suppliers that actually do understand that in-country complexities and the compliance and legislation. So with, the GPA, we hear all sorts of different things because maybe somewhere's gone into a new territory. So you really do need to have that understanding. And also, we have had we ran a survey a few years back, and we had some of our members that were using over 100 different companies to process their payrolls. So I think that's really coming to an end. And as Valerio said, the consolidation really is key, but actually having people that understand, or companies that understand that entity or that country as well. And also on the EOR side, that's changing, isn't it? I mean, Rick, we've spoken about this on and off for years, haven't we? And more governments are now looking at the EOR space, aren't they? And trying to work out, is it in Germany? I think it's really difficult to have an EOR in Germany. And then there's other countries where you can only have EOR in a certain place. So if you can have your own entity, again, that is cheaper in the long run. But there's a place for everything, I suppose.
Yeah, I think when you think about complexity, I think here's the beauty about going globally. No pun intended. Going globally is not every company does it the same way. Every company is unique. So some companies definitely want to, especially publicly traded companies are a little bit bigger. They're really about their brand recognition. They may want to make sure they're established in these particular countries. They have a investment in particular countries and they want to set up entities. There are some companies that are going to be, hey, we're just going to hire 1 or 2 talent in a particular country, and so they're going to use like an employee record. And then some of them are project-based, and they're going to want to use contractors because they're going to be project-based, and they feel like that's going to be a better solution for them, and they give a lot more flexibility for those individuals, and maybe they're dipping their toe in that market. The joys about having the right partner behind that, when you think about your talent acquisition part of that, is that partner who can sit down with you and say, hey, here's what's statutory, here's what's customary, and here's what people are going to just overall expect in that experience, and help you put together that package. I think working in a platform that can do that, and again, that will be what we do here at Globally, and give you that flexibility is important, but making sure that you have the tools and that you're sitting at the table. I cannot stress enough, payroll has to sit at the table in partnership with talent acquisition to ensure that you are retaining and attracting and retaining talent in your global kind of talent acquisition approach. You have great partners like Workfully who can sit down with you and kind of walk you through some of that, but having the right technology implemented as part of the conversation of how you're actually going to go and attract that talent and onboard that talent is really important in the conversation and the strategy of the business to make sure you're setting yourself up for success.
And Valerio, one of the topics that we discussed this morning in our meeting was the good old topic of on-demand pay or earned wage access. How are you sort of seeing that in the workforce management? Is that when you're on the recruitment side or the talent acquisition side? Are you seeing people requesting that? I know in some countries it's not really seen, but it is starting to. I don't want to say hit, but it is starting to come to market in different countries. But I just wondered what's your thoughts on that? Because obviously payroll has a role to play if you do choose that solution.
So you mean, just to make sure I understand correctly, you mean the ability to be paid at any point in the month, right?
Yeah,
whatever you've been working with.
Yeah, people call it different things. So, but yeah, so when they can draw down their money. On-demand pay, okay.
Yeah, no, I got that. I'm actually a very good friend with the CEO of a company that is called Payflow, and they do that. Essentially, they just enable companies to do that, and they've been paid by Y Combinator, so they raise from investors and everything. And as far as I understand, that is not very common yet when it comes to knowledge work. So everything that is like office work and so on. People that have been paid historically, but bi-weekly, or monthly. But a segment that I think it's requesting this and it's seeing the most benefit from this kind of payroll feature. It's more retail kind of worker, blue collar retail, or non-office kind of worker. First, because they typically earn less than a knowledge worker or somebody in an office setting. So they tend to live paycheck to paycheck, statistically speaking, more than office worker, right? So in that context, that kind of benefit can make a big impact, right? If I have a problem or anything that come up that wasn't expected, the ability for me to access that money, that can make a difference. And as far as I understand, it's a very big perk in that kind of sectors, so retail, blue collars, even hospitality, right? When it comes to talent attraction, because instead of being paid once a month, you can get paid, whenever you want during the month, whenever you need it, because it's your money, right? So as far as I understand, in those settings, it can really make a difference. I'm not sure yet in an office setting if it's something that can really move the needle.
Yeah.
So I'll get into that because we actually are doing that here globally as well. And so what we've looked at it in a different way though. So we call that your liability, kind of what you're actually building. So when we talk about white collar workers, people who are working in offices, employers want to understand what their total liability is. And so to calculate payroll on a day-to-day basis, it's really important. So we don't just calculate payroll, we also look at it from a PTO perspective, or pay time off, or vacation accrual behind that as well. So we look at your total liability on our employee profile. A customer can log in and actually see that, and it calculates every single day. So if something's been earned for PTO, if it's actually wages that were earned, it shows you what your total liability is for that particular employee. Now, we've taken that a step further. To your point, Valerio, the companies that we're talking to that are in the retail space, those companies are asking about earned wages access now, or on-demand pay. They're asking for that because they want to be a little bit more competitive, because they have higher turnover and they want to be able to attract talent that's going to say, hey, we can pay you every single day, or give you access to that every single day. And what you want to make sure you understand behind that, though, is what the implications are for the business. Does that mean you're going to have more administrative tasks? That means you're going to have more access, or you're going to have to do payroll every single day. And I know that a bunch of payroll individuals on this call go, I cannot process payroll every day. So making it a little bit more simplistic for people, I think, is really important. And so our methodology and how we've actually thought about it was having it visible and employees be able to pay out on that, or be to pull from that through kind of the integrations that we have with money movement and pulling from our clients, and the clients having visibility of that. So something if the employee requested, from a liability perspective, the client has to sign off on it, but they can do that without having to process payroll. And then the final payroll itself is processed in the normal cycle, but it gives access to that without having to do a lot of administrative work. And so we're testing that something that's new. We just released this, so it's in our beta test, but we're finding that our customers are very excited about it. They're actually really trying to make sure that it makes sense for their business. But to your point, we're seeing more blue collar or retail organizations use it, but that liability part of the platform that we've put, that has become a tool that our white collar clients like, because they can see, hey, what's our liability here for this particular employee in this particular country on a day-to-day basis, and they can run reporting on that. So if finance has a question on it, they're looking at cash flow issues, they're maybe looking at how, budgeting for the future, what that could look like. They can use those type of tools on a day-to-day basis to understand where they're at. And actually, we had a client who's going through a capital raise right now who said the same thing. They said, going through a capital raise, I need to understand what my liabilities are today. And we're like, oh, here, click this, and there it is. And they were able to run that report and get that over to their investors. That's the type of out of the box thinking we're thinking about, because we understand that wage access is predominantly for blue collar and gray collar businesses, but we want to make sure that we make it advantageous for white collar businesses to be able to have access to that information, to be able to make sure they're competitive and have the tools for success for their business.
And I think, because I am now the older generation, is that the younger generation are expecting everything to be now, aren't they? I mean, is the on-demand pay or earned wage access is actually going to change the way that we will pay people, because in the UK it's predominantly you wait a month and then you get paid, but you're actually working a month. So I think if there is that facility where you can offer that to people, that will be a really nice benefit to have. And when we spoke about it this morning, people were seeing that as a hiring benefit, that people were going to jobs because they have that facility to be able to do that. And it's like the older generation almost like have to change their way of thinking for pay. And I know people who process payrolls will be thinking, please don't say daily pay. But in 10 years' time, is that where we're going to be with daily pay?
Well, I think daily pay, let's kind of talk about the elephant in the room, Melanie. Daily pay doesn't mean you're processing payroll every single day. What it means is that you're giving access to your talent to be able to withdraw from money that they actually earned. So if you have the right system to be able to help you with that workflow, then you're not going to have the administrative burden that you think you're going to have. Because when we think about processing payroll, look, I'm going to date myself because I've been in payroll for over 20 years. But I remember the days where I used to have to pull out a bunch of Post-it notes and look at everything I had to do in payroll. And I was getting this into my Excel file and then sending that to a payroll provider. That is not where we are today with technology. We have moved light years ahead of that. So if we think about kind of on-demand pay, it's really just having the right platform to give you access or give your employees access to actually process payroll or get access to what their payroll they've earned, but you're still only processing payroll if it's monthly or biweekly or weekly, whatever your cycle is in that particular country. That's what you're processing. And to the point of what we're talking about today is, if you're looking at ways to attract talent, absolutely, the generational kind of mindset has changed. People, I call this generation the popcorn generation. They want it that fast. They want things right away. And so to be able to make sure you attract that talent that's coming into the workforce, you've got to be agile in your approach and have the right platform and the right partner who can do that. Because you're absolutely right. I've been in payroll. I don't want to process payroll every single day as an administrator. I want to be able to have a technology tool that's going to allow me to still be competitive in the marketplace, but not have to do the administrative burden. I still want to do my payroll on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis, but I want to make sure my employees have access so I can be competitive to retain that talent.
And
yeah, so, just to add a little bit more on that, Rick, what we're seeing from a talent attraction standpoint is that there's almost a merge when it comes to employees' needs between contractors and full-time employees, right? And being paid on a daily schedule, it's something that you would expect from a consultant, a contractor, right? To think about their own salary in that way. But you're right, new generations, that they're very attracted by that kind of thinking. And they also understand, the resistance from a payroll standpoint, right? Because most people, they are still stuck on, running payroll. They did run payroll like for 10 years, right? That is very manual. It's very little automation. There's a lot of manual processes, a lot of mistakes. Imagine having to do that on a daily basis, right? So this is probably what they're thinking. But today, with the technology we have, is essentially like a process that does itself, right? If you have the right tools, like globally, or you have enough AI into your payroll process, and you have enough consolidation among your HR systems, then it's something that really can run almost autonomously, right? And at the end of the day, you just have another top benefits for your employees, with very little manual work on your end, right? But also you need to make sure to have the right tech stack and setting when it comes to HR providers.
Well, I think that here's the thing. Let's be completely frank. You have one obligation as an employer to an employee, which is make sure they get paid on time and correctly. That is your obligation as an employer. And so having the right tools to help you do that, I think it's important. But let's get back to the initial facts. Employees, if you mess up their payroll more than twice. So here's a fact. In countries where you have monthly payroll, that's 2 months. Countries where you have weekly payroll, that's 2 weeks. Countries where you have bi-weekly payroll, that's 2 weeks. So 4 weeks. So those, you don't have a lot of time to mess up payroll before you possibly lose that individual person. And we know as HR and payroll professionals, to rehire someone, the cost associated with that is exorbitant. It costs more to replace a position than it takes to actually hire someone the first time. So it's important that you make sure you have the right technology, the process, and procedures in communication from talent acquisition, payroll, and HR to make sure everyone's fully in line to ensure that it's done correctly. I think I don't know how to stress that enough. We have to make sure it's done correctly. We have to make sure it's processed. How you do that is making sure you have the right tools, the right partners, and the right communication within your organization to ensure you're setting yourselves up for success.
And you're right with tech. Employees want to understand their pay slip. They want to see everything now on the phone. They want to see what taxes they're paying and everything else. So tech is a really important thing. I'll come back to you on AI. It made me smile because every session we always have AI. It's it's obviously the way forward. But I don't want to be too negative. However, I just wondered if you've seen a situation where payroll has negatively affected recruitment or retention, and that's not with not paying people on time, but anything else that they've done, like communication.
Yeah, sure. I can get this. One of the most common mistakes we see is companies wanting to access global talent pools. They go in there, but they're totally unprepared when it comes to payroll, right? To the right payroll providers, how payroll is calculated, how employee benefits are delivered, what is the minimum level of labor compliance that is specific to that country, and so on. So there's a variety of things that companies should think about. But sometimes when the business need is there and you need to act quickly, the first thing you do is you try and find the talent you need so that they come to us. Hey, help us out, finding this engineering team in I don't know, whatever country that is, right? And fortunately, we know by now that most customers, they need to be assessed, right? So we flag that. We try to assess as much as possible if they are prepared as well from a payroll standpoint. But I remember like many times where we just assume that the company already had all everything clear when it comes to payroll, and that was a big mistake, because it led to offer rejected. It led to situations that were not compliant from a labor standpoint, so to legal risk to the customer. And honestly, sometimes even the possibility to get sued by a candidate or an employee that you just hired, because you're not fully compliant, you're not respecting your obligation, because just you don't know about it, right? So probably, like, if I had to flag like one mistake when it comes to payroll and talent acquisition, it's that one. So underestimating the complexity of global payroll, assuming that your current provider can deliver on that, because maybe from a marketing standpoint, you read on the website, they can deliver in, I don't know, 100 country or whatever that is, but then it's not really like that, right? So probably like the number one pitfall, it would be that one.
Yeah, it's getting payroll in the room, isn't it, Rick? Like when you're hiring, get payroll in the room. But go on, over to you, Rick.
Yeah, it's to your point, Melanie. Here's the big mistake that I've seen with payroll, with customers. If you don't communicate internally, you hear me talk about communication quite a few times here. You hire somebody. I'll give an example. You have to register certain people in certain countries with Social Security. So if you're not established in that country quite yet, and you can't register someone in Social Security, employees actually can see that pretty clearly, very quickly, that they're not registered in many countries. So that transparency is really important, that communication. And when you bring payroll to the table and have that conversation, payroll can help you say, hey, these are the 3 things that we need to have done. This is the time frame that we have to have that done. If it's even bringing in a partner, let's say you don't have a big payroll department and you need support and you're doing mass hiring right now, an organization like Globally, we can help with that. We can help with that communication through our managed payroll solution. We can talk through how do you make sure you get set up. We actually, within our platform, we have a implementation checklist. So you actually do all your implementation within our system. So we're very transparent on how that looks when you're onboarding an employee. And you can see very directly, hey, we've got to register this employee by this date. So you have to have that. If you're not going to meet this deadline, you're not going to be able to hire them. That level of transparency is really important with your provider. I have had horror stories with customers that we were bringing over that said to us, they told me they were registered and we found out 3 months later that didn't happen. They were told that they were going to process the payroll and pay taxes. We found out they didn't pay those taxes. Those are the things that unfortunately give a bad notion to everyone in this industry. But having a right partner and having payroll at the table and making business decisions really will let you set yourself up for success. I cannot stress that enough. I have a lot of cuts and bruises. You don't see it because I have a beautiful filter here, but there's a lot of cuts and bruises from examples over the last, I want to say 20 something years that I've been in payroll, where I've seen just things happen, and not by malicious intent. It's just business, right? And so making sure that you're being as proactive as possible. If you're thinking about hiring someone in a different country, payroll should be aware of that. They should give you the tools. They should tell you what you need. If you're going to do an acquisition, let payroll be part of that conversation. I just had another customer who said we're buying this company, and they had no idea that when they transfer employees over, that it's a thing called GPA, or when the transfer of their, that has to be in place. They didn't even realize that was in place, and that created nuances for how they actually onboarded and hired and paid talent from the organization they acquired. So payroll is fundamentally really important to set you up for success if they're sitting at the table and they have the right tools behind them to be able to give you what you need to make sure you retain that talent.
Yeah, I've come across, you always have the horror stories. There was a recent horror story of somebody I know who was employed in Australia, and they didn't have an entity there, and their superannuation wasn't being dealt with, and blah, 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 So, and it just put a dampener, like Valeria, I can imagine with the people that you work with, if that happened, it's just a really awful situation. And it was something that you could tell that the employee just didn't feel good. It's like, yeah, it gets sorted. And obviously it didn't get sorted. Sorry.
Employees know what they expect. So something like superannuation in Australia, that's common. Every employer has to have it. Every employee is entitled to it. They know what they're entitled to. They know their rights in that country. You may not know that because you're not operating in Australia, but they do. So it's important that you come to the table when you're communicating with talent with as much information and much knowledge you know to make sure you're setting yourself up for success. Because again, let's say you're not set up completely yet. You can at least have that conversation and set the expectation up front.
And again, it's getting payroll at the table when you're looking to recruit in new territories to understand what the complexities are. And then, Valeria, you don't have a situation where potentially you've got new talent going into a company and you're sorting that one out legally, which you don't really want to do. If you could give any bit of advice to payroll professionals, what would it be who want to demonstrate their role in talent strategy? How would it be to communicate, or what bit of advice would you give them?
What I would do is essentially lead with data, because data is very important when it comes to talent acquisition. So I think like most of the time the conversation is too oriented to compliance, saying, hey, the payroll person is there just saying, okay, we're not compliant, we can do that, we can do this, and so on. But while we work with other payroll professionals that have the right tool set, the right providers, and so on, and they can actually hire. They know beforehand the countries where they can hire from, and what they can do. They can use payroll data. They can have market analysis. They can say, hey, why don't we look at this other country? These are the benefits that you should offer. These are the salary ranges, etc. Right? And in that scenario, you really evolve the payroll role into a more strategic advisor kind of role for talent acquisition. And I think that is probably like the most useful thing that a payroll professional can do, right? Moving from strictly compliance and operational kind of role into more a strategic advisory kind of role, and especially when you move in a global setting, that is not only possible but is needed from talent acquisition professionals, right? To lead and understand the strategy and the decision.
Yeah, I think that payroll has to be a value-add partner. I agree with you 100%, Valerio, where you don't want to be the no person, right? You want to be the no but, right? What's the solution? What are you looking to provide? And I think payroll can do that. I keep stressing the right tool set, and that is not a commercial for Globally, but we do have a great tool set. But it's really making sure that you have the right partners. GPA, for example, great partner to reach out to ask that information, right? Get clarity. Melanie's team can really support you through that and help you understand some of the complexities of what goes on in these particular countries and what partners you can partner with in those markets. Looking at your talent as well, when you work with recruiters, making sure, like Workfully, they can provide a lot of insight, especially if they've got experience in recruiting talent in that marketplace. So having those questions up front, and a good recruiter is going to tell you, hey, this is what you need to expect in that particular market. Here's the benchmark, right? This is what's statutory that you need to be aware of. And then you also have to look at your agility. As I mentioned earlier, not every company expands the same way. Not everyone has the same global journey. And so making sure that you have flexibility in your systems and your partner that can really meet you where you are in your global journey and can provide the right, I like to say, the right puzzle pieces or the missing puzzle pieces that you need to make sure you're setting yourselves up for success. I think those are things that you need to think about. And I think for payroll, it's having to find that, using those resources. GPA, working with the talent acquisition partners they have, working with the providers like Globally that they have, and helping them come up with a solution before they actually get someone on board and then find out what actually happens and creates a really bad experience for them. So just be useful with the tools you have. And Google is not your tool. I will not stress using Google because it's got a lot of people in trouble from that. But GPA is phenomenal in that. And they will put you and guide you in the right direction to make sure you're setting yourselves up for success.
Well, thank you, Rick. Yes, and ChatGPT. Stop saying to me ChatGPT says this, because it's not always correct. But one thing I will say, and I think it's becoming more and more apparent, is actually to look at companies like Globally and Workly, that you are partners, that you should be working as partners. So everyone should understand what your business strategy should be, and that's payroll leaders understanding what the payroll strategy or the employee strategy is. And rather than, not speaking to either party for months on end, it's almost like you need to have that partnership where you can phone up and say, hey, we need somebody in Spain or Barcelona, have that beautiful background in Barcelona, and then phone up Rick, hey, look, we haven't got an entity or anything in Barcelona. Can you help us out? So it's actually understanding. And unfortunately, with payroll, we hear it all the time. You are sometimes the last people to know that there's been a person recruited in that region. So if you've got better relationships with companies like Globally and Rick, then they will help you out. So I think it's really important to start having a partnership with organisations.
Yeah, I think Melanie, for that, I will say that when we look at what Globally can do, we're very much focused on payments, employee payments, making sure that employees are paid correctly, make sure they're onboarded correctly. We meet our clients where they are, and I think that that's really important to understand what's needed in that particular marketplace. It's what you need, and we have clients all the time. I tell them, even if you're not in this particular country, call us. If you're thinking about going there, call us. Let us help you through that. Let us be your strategic partner behind that. So I think it's important. I say this all the time. Ask 1,000 questions. Please never assume. Make sure that you understand what you're doing, what you're getting into. My previous life, I was in 167 countries. Before that, I was doing business in Saudi Arabia, Singapore, and Japan. Before that, I had to figure out how to hire people in South Africa. And here at Globally, we're in 127 countries. So it's not if going global was easy, everyone would do it, but making sure you have the right tool set, the right partners, and an ecosystem. And again, as I can reiterate, GPA, a Workfully, a Globally, we're really here to help you to make sure that you're setting yourselves up for success.
And we are coming to a natural end, but I will say the other thing that we haven't really discussed is when you're removing somebody from an organisation, because there's complexities there. So it's not necessarily the hiring. I don't want to say the word firing, but it's also the firing and understanding that if you are going into a new region, that actually there could be a really complex situation of actually letting employees go in that country. So it is actually a really complex situation. Well, as you said, if it was so easy, everyone would be doing payroll globally.
Well, I think the termination pay of employees is complex. I think it's really important that it's, for example, in Spain, it's based on your CPA. In certain countries, it's based on kind of the rules and regulations that are in that particular country, based on the industry as well. So having the right partner, the right technology, for example, we have all those rules built into our platform. So we talk about liability, right? So that liability calculation on a daily basis tells you what your liability is to terminate someone on that particular day if you wanted to. But it's important that you understand that and what that means, and what that process needs to look like. When I remember the first time I actually went to Spain, I was like, what is a finiquito? Like, what do you mean? I didn't understand what that meant. And so having to learn that is really important. It's because we have the experience. We've got 20 plus years of experience in actually operating and doing business in these particular countries. We can help you learn from a lot of our own mistakes so that you can make sure you're setting yourself up for success. That's what you want within a partner. You want a partner who really understands it. You don't want someone who just decided to get into global payroll. You want someone that's actually been in it, both from a practitioner, but also someone that's an operator as well, that can really support you through that process.
So we are coming to an end, but we have got a question. Oh, sorry, Valerio, you carry on.
No, not really. I mean, just probably what Rick just highlighted, one of the main mistakes, right? When we spoke previously about the mistakes companies do when hiring a new employee in the foreign countries, but terminating an employee, it's way harder, right? And it's much more contentious and it's much more complex because it's so different depending on the country. So like working with the right partner, with the right advisor, you can really not do that, relying on ChatGPT for sure.
Oh, wow. Well, ChatGPT. That's all I hear. Well, ChatGPT says, so talking about that. So Joseph, thanks for the question. I'm having more conversation where AI is popping up as a point of interest in global payroll software. What are your thoughts on AI support with compliance, HR and payroll? Can I just say, be careful. Still need to research, but Rick and Valerio.
So AI is a huge foundation of our platform. We believe in AI, but to a certain extent, right? AI is a tool. It's not a chatbot. I don't believe in AI chatbots, but I do believe it's a tool to make sure you set yourself for success. But based on the rules and regulations in many countries, there still has to be a human factor in actual how you're processing payroll or even hiring talent. You can't use AI to completely make hiring decisions for you. That's actually not legal in many countries. Same with payroll. Payroll cannot be completely 100% processed by AI. There has to be a human factor in that. So when you're looking at tools and partners, I would ask them what their process is if they're leveraging AI when these things are triple checked or double checked by humans. Now, happy, Joseph, if you want to reach out to me, happy to walk you through that a little bit of what we're doing here at Globally to ensure we're fully compliant by that. And hopefully I have some good news. We're actually in the middle of trying to get our ISO certification for AI, actually because we were very keen on making sure we comply with these laws. But I think the one thing is the human factor in AI is always going to be required, based not just because it's a good thing to do, but based on legislation right now in many countries, especially for hiring talent, but now even payroll, that's a new law that just came out in the EU, there has to be human authentication or verification of payroll in the process. And so we do that and we comply with that, but happy to walk you through a little bit what you should be asking any provider that you're working with. AI is an absolute tool. You have to have it if you're going to compete in the global marketplace, but you have to make sure that you're fully compliant in your process and procedures, and you should be partnering with a firm that really understands that completely to make sure you're compliant, not just their firm.
Yeah, and just super quick, because we are coming to an end. If you're using ChatGPT, if you think that a human has put that information on and it's scanning and finding information that could be incorrect. So as Rick has said, I'm not talking about AI that a company has built, but if you're using ChatGPT for your compliance, you do need to have that second, third opinion whether or not that is correct. So AI, fantastic, it's the future, but for now I would say if you're using ChatGPT or similar, just be a little bit careful. Right, Valerio, is there anything that you want to finish with at all? If people want to contact you, are you happy for them to contact you via LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like just reach out on LinkedIn. We're very active at Workfully, and again, the part of the problem we solve is really finding that talent in foreign countries, and then we're fortunate enough to work with partners like Globally when it comes to doing the payroll part, right? So feel free to reach out. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. And Rick?
So really quickly, I'm gonna have a boy crush moment really quick. I wanna give some shout out. I am extremely proud of Valerio and what they're doing at Workfully. Valerio was at another one of my startups years ago, and he has become a CEO and has grown. He's just a phenomenal. They're a phenomenal firm. You should definitely reach out to them for recruiting. But I like to build CEOs. I get to see this actually come to fruition. So a little congratulations for everything that you guys are doing, Valerio, over there. I'm very proud of you, and you guys should reach out to him. We also use him for our recruiting. So for what I would say to this is, you want to make sure that you're doing things the right way. Again, ask questions and make sure that you are bringing payroll to the table every single time you're having these conversations, because payroll can really make your job a lot easier. And if you're in payroll and you're not at the table, it's important and imperative that you speak with your executive team and remind them of the importance and the value you bring to a business and how they expand and manage the team globally.
And as Valerio said, data. That's, that is key to get that seat. But thank you so much. One question I didn't ask, which I'm so gutted about, is I always ask at the beginning of every LinkedIn Live, where is everyone dialing in from? And I didn't do it because I love seeing where people are dialing in. But if you're on there now and you want to put it in, then that'd be great on the comment box. But anyway, I've really enjoyed today. It's really interesting, and payroll definitely has a part in on the talent side and keeping talent, retention and everything else. Valerio, it's been fantastic talking to you. I have to say, your background has made me smile, and knowing it's real, it's beautiful. And obviously, Rick, yours has with your new Globally company and sign and the green, fantastic. So thank you once again. If you need to contact Rick or Valerio, as I said, contact them via LinkedIn. But thank you, everyone, and I will see you next month with Rick. See you later.
Thank you, guys.